Today's episode is brought to you by Riddick Entertainment. Riddick Entertainment is a multifaceted event management firm based in Northern Virginia. Whether designing weddings, milestone celebrations, corporate events, galas, or charitable functions, their detailed creativity and precision event planning will give you a truly meaningful and memorable experience.
All right, listeners, and we're back. We are back again today with our wonderful guest, Heather Hutchison. She is the CEO and founder of the SoundMind Collective. Uh, we've been we've been having an awesome conversation, and I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned before we went to break. You had spoke about how the white community uh, you're trying to help them address and understand the stress that their black co-workers are going through, during this social climate. But my question really is, you know, and I'm trying to, as delicate as I can put it, so white folks don't understand what they're going through, but why does it seem like they don't really understand it until it happens to them? Or it's not important until something tragic happens to them? You kind of understand the question? Like, you know what I mean?
I
Because it's
do.
okay that it happens in the black community, but then it's really an issue when something like that tragic happens to you.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if this will make sense. I hope that I can speak it articulately enough. I noticed, gosh, I think maybe I was a teenager when I started recognizing and speaking to friends and my parents, and who probably all thought I was crazy. But I would watch shows like Cops, or true crime shows and things like that, and I was just very much aware that the way that I saw um, Black communities deal with grief and pain and trauma looked very different from how white people handled it. And so that was a thought that I had early on. Didn't really know what to do with it. I noticed it. I wanted to explore it, but didn't really, didn't have the maturity yet, I guess, until the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I've grown through that. And I think part of that answer is that the history for Black people in the United States has overall been traumatic and painful and grief stricken and bloody and ugly and unjust, and for white people, it has largely not, or if it has, it's been subsets of white people, that the collective white group can kind of point to this subset of white people. So I think what happens is that, uh, you know, when you don't have the history of having had to deal with pain and trauma, not just personally, but as a community, the way that Black people do, then something that probably to you all is very minor, which usually is
Mm-hmm.
very minor, rocks white people's world. Like it's just they all of a sudden have this sense of injustice of like, how could this possibly happen to us? Because they haven't had to be uncomfortable. And I think what we don't recognize as white people is that most Black people in this country live with some level of underlying uncomfortability all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no relief from it. Whereas for us, our default feeling is safety and being comfortable and feeling like we have the run of the world. So that's why it's not funny, but I laugh when people get so upset about the protesters and all that, because really what they're irritated about is that you're inconveniencing them. You're getting in their way. They're over it. Like, can you please just move on? And so I think what has happened is, because white people have been the power in this country, is it's very much a I don't want to, I don't know what other word to use. So I'm just going to say narcissistic. I don't think that that's for all white people, but it's very much self-absorbed, I guess, is probably a better way of looking at it. We tend to only see things from our perspective. And if we look through another lens, it's still a white lens. We have a difficult time really seeing how someone else may be hurting, and you can see that even in conversations, in comments, in articles, because it even if we sound like we're being empathetic, we have a really awful way of still centering ourselves in that story,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's just cultural and habitual, and it's ugly.
I saw
Well,
that too. I just saw the news. I was watching the news, and they said, I mean, the newscaster said, um, how long are these protests going to last? Like, how long is this going to be? Like, this is going on long enough. At some point, they have to stop. And I was thinking, like, wow, he really just said that. And it wasn't someone who was coming on as an affiliate or someone who was coming on. It was the actual news person. And I was just
I
like,
believe it.
wow. And it was, you know, talking about because of the destruction and the you know, the way that the protests are going down a violent path, and you know, it should stop. It's a better way, because the message of what you're protesting is getting lost in the violence. And I'm thinking it's getting lost because of you, because
Right.
you are only focusing on the end of part of the violence. You don't actually see what's starting this, or who. You won't listen to the people on the ground who's saying this is peaceful, because 93% of the protests are peaceful, but then the other half of that is because of police over zealousness with you know, the rubber bullets and the tear gas and these kind of things. And it just brings me back to when you just said that, like the inconvenience of it all. I think, and I never thought about that. I just was just wondering, like, maybe you just don't care. That's why. But I guess it's because it's the inconvenience.
but not only that, I think she hit it on the head. Just the way what I took from that, really, the biggest thing, how self-centered of a community they can be, because they've never had to experience some of the daily struggles that we have. So when they, even though they may be really in their way being empathetic or sympathetic, it's still wrapped around in that, you still hear that self-centeredness when it comes out. And like the news reporter you're talking about, so that struck a chord. That's very important. Now I can look at it differently, in my mind. Now I won't be as angry, or I don't have to be as angry, right? Because like Heather said, I mean, he may be in his way sympathetic, but you're really inconveniencing me now. Like, dude, like, get over it. Like, and that's how it comes across. Dude, get over it.
Well, yeah.
It is.
You know what I'm saying? So, and
basically,
no
when
need
you
for me
at
to get
work,
mad now, but
like she said, when you're at work and you're the only Black person, and I like what you said too, Heather, that you come in, but you have to perform, even though, like with George Floyd, right? The world was heavy after that. It was so thick, and everybody's hearts was like, wow. And for Black people, we weren't thinking that George Floyd was the start of anything, how it started being portrayed. It was not again. It was like this again. But then you have to go to work being the only Black person, and you got this, you have this weight on you, and then everybody's walking around like, you know, you still have to be, but inside you're enraged, you're depressed, you're trying not to cry, and then someone just comes over and says, and I'm talking from my own experience, I didn't might as well just go into it, and come over and say, well, what's the matter with you? You're not your usual laughy, jokey self today. Are you okay, Elisa? And I'm thinking, no news. You're not watching anything that's going on in the world, and thinking that with COVID-19 hitting us in disproportionate rates, you know, me being a New Yorker, that was heavy for me. And then this, I'm a Black woman sitting here. I'm here. I'm hello. Like, you don't realize what's going on. And then you hear those little conversations that you just have to ignore at work. Those little microaggressions, those little things that are really daggers, that you have no choice at this time but to either go in the bathroom and cry, wipe it off, and then get back to it because you're at work. I think
Yep.
that the Sound Mind Collective can be useful in job situations like that, because then you can say culturally, right? Something is going on. Here's my experts. This is how you should
Hmm.
be handling your
Yeah.
employees.
Right.
You know, just on that though, like, are you finding that um, you're having a lot of people reach out to you and the Sound Mind Collective, excuse me, mouthful, and looking to engage you and coming in to address things like Lisa's talking about, in today's climate?
Hmm. Yeah. So there definitely is an awareness with the current culture that's going on, that lots of organizations, from police to schools to whatever, board of supervisors, say that we need to do something different. And I have said this before, that I get the whole implicit bias training, but I'm not a huge fan of it. I feel like it's you know a it's a check mark for organizations to say to the community, "Hey, look, we're doing something," and the community says, "Oh, great, they're doing something." But from my perspective, I think it's just a place where you are highlighting for a lot of white people places that they maybe didn't even recognize that they had issues, and then just leaving them with that. Like I Okay, and then typically, because of what I said before with the self-absorption, is it becomes this internalized, guilt that they're not really sure how to process, and then that gets annoying, and and then they want to bring that guilt to their black friends, and did you know this was happening? My God, Karen, yes, I've known this has been happening for so many years. Thanks for joining the table,
Right.
and that's obnoxious. So I think
Right.
that there is an awareness that there needs to be something more done than just the implicit bias training. The problem I'm having, I would say, is that I can get a lot of people on board in powerful positions who believe that this needs to happen. Getting organizations to set aside the amount of time that I think should be necessary to not, like you were saying before, to not make this a band-aid solution, but to really kind of deal with some things at a foundational level. That's where the hard piece is. And so I think there's a tendency for organizations to be willing to cut some corners and just do like piece some things together, whereas my desire would be for it always to be a comprehensive approach. I've had to realize that might not, realistically, that may not always happen. But hopefully, even just having experience with me, when it goes well the first time, maybe they'll call me back again. And if that's the way we have to do it sometimes, then that's the way we have to do it. But I don't. I think white people want there to be a fix, but they want it to be easy. They want it to be quick, fast, and in a hurry, and let's get it done. And I just don't. I don't think it's gonna be that way. So I would like for organizations to kind of give me some more time to
What
do some of
time
this.
how much time do you require to get the whole comprehensive package from Sound Mind Collective? How much time is that?
Yeah, so to do the entire thing from beginning to end, if we're starting at policies and going all the way through to leaving with a strategic plan in place, between 5 and 6 months. Now that
That's not a lot
the,
of time. That's good.
and you're not necessarily doing something every week.
Right.
There would be a push at the beginning to really audit all the policies and procedures, and a push to get some information from your staff anonymously, because that's another thing. Is I come in and I'm like, here's some of the things that have been said that maybe people feel like that they can't say when it's not anonymous. These are some issues we need to deal with on how you do hiring and firing and disciplinary stuff. And so it's not that there's 6 months where they're having to be engaged with us every day or even every week, but from beginning to end to really do a good job, a good 6 months. But I think that at least the conversational part should be a workshop at a minimum that is 2 90-minute pieces. And to me, that sounds like nothing. I mean, I could talk about it for hours and hours. But to them, when I'm talking to school systems and they give 45 minutes to the equity and accountability team for their yearly training, they see the need for it, but having to convince all the powers that be that this really is crucial, I think that's probably one of my biggest challenges.
So I'm sorry, Dame, did you have something? Okay. So how does the community help back your initiative? Like, let's just say with hypothetical for like a school system, how does the community say, well, we know there's a problem here. We
So
have this. So
yeah,
how can
absolutely.
we want the SoundMind Collective and we want the comprehensive package to know that this is done. Is there some way that the community can get involved to help push this agenda?
Absolutely. So and I can do, this is helpful to me because this is new, at some level for me as well. But I can put that on my website and also on YouTube, so people know who has my proposals. But I would say it's similar to like what happened with the ending qualified immunity thing, is that when you have a group of people who are like, whoa, 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 hang on. We know you have this proposal in place. We think that it's valuable. Our children go to this school, we want you to sign the contract. I think that's helpful. The more people who send the emails, make the phone calls, push it over the edge. So I have been in communication with Stafford County Schools. They are very interested in what I'm doing. A contract has not been signed yet. And I think the only reason is because when they came back to ask kind of the timing for even like workshops and stuff, I need to go back and email her this week and say, I know that it's the time, isn't it? I think that's overwhelming to them, but I think it's necessary. I think you've got to be able to make space for those hard conversations. And I think the community, like what you're saying, that having them speak up and say, yeah, this is important and it should be required, and we want the contract signed, would be beneficial.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I think that especially the school system, it is very, very, very important that we have that, because I raised my son in Stafford County school system, and I experience, unfortunately, I don't want to say outright racism, but I want to say willful ignorance, right? Because you didn't understand the culture, right? And you didn't
Yep.
understand when we came here in 98, my son was 6. So we were here in first grade. And he was the only one African-American in the class. And it was a struggle. And I
I'm
didn't
sure.
realize till recently, when all of my nephews and was actually describing, because how does a child put into words their actual day-to-day struggle, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So until now they're grown and adults, and they were like, yeah, it was rough going through the whole gamut. And we were like, well, why didn't you, express that? And it was like, well, I guess they couldn't articulate at that time, what they were like experiencing. And so I think that for that type of the SoundMind Collective to be inserted in a school system should be mandatory when you're dealing with a minority, because in Stafford County, African Americans are only 19% of the whole population. So
Right.
yes, and even less when it comes to African American teachers. So
Oh yeah,
we
hardly
do.
any.
Right. So we do need to have something to push for that SoundMind Collective to be installed, to go the full gamut. I would want the full gamut, so that our students, when you realize that maybe they're having something else go on, right? Culturally, that you may not understand.
Yep.
And that you need to have some level of compassion, and that everything is not a straight from act to disciplinary action to
Yes.
SRO to juvenile detention, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I
huge for
agree,
me.
I
but
know
I
it
think
is. I know it
I
is,
think
Heather.
Yeah.
listening to this though, I think this is a great, and this is just me speaking outside the box. Creating a pilot program, you know, if we're using Stafford, let's just say, because I think there's so much involved in this that can be a nationwide pilot program, but it starts within the community, like Heather said, because the school
Yes.
board is only going by whatever information that they're thinking that is important. And when I hear 45 minutes, is that all you really think that's important of your student body and the collective community? And that's the first thing I hear that needs to be addressed. You know, to get them to understand that it's more than important. Because like Heather, 2 90-minute sessions is really, and again, I don't want to say, I don't want to diminish it, but that's minute.
Oh,
But they
it's
don't even want to
nothing.
commit to two. They're doing 45 in one session.
And that's what they were
Eh,
given. That's the accountability and equity office that deals with not just, I mean, with all equity. So we're
with all
talking
right.
about with special ed, we're talking
Hmm.
about, with different cultures, with racism, with
Right.
ESL students. So
Right.
that's
Wow.
all she was. And
Right.
I do have to say that in this area, our superintendent and the woman who's in charge of the accountability and equity group, they 100% are on board and they want this desperately.
Okay.
So I think that was good for you, Lisa, to say that if the community just gets behind it and says,
Right.
yes, we agree, then they can
Right.
push it to the
I'm gonna
outside
make
and
that happen.
say,
Right. That's exactly what
because
I'm
I
hearing, and
think
I
it
think that
should
would
be
be great.
required training. I really,
Do
not because
too.
it's me,
Hmm.
but because this is where we live. This is where my kids go to school. This is,
Right.
this needs to be dealt with. And then you have, the few African American teachers in our schools, and they're having to bear the weight of
Hmm.
being the wanting to be there for their students, but then they wind up being the only person of contact for, African American students to come to with their struggles, or to come to about extracurricular things, or to start clubs. And it shouldn't be all on their shoulders. It shouldn't at
Right.
all. Like,
Yep.
that's just not fair. There's so many layers to it that,
Right.
yeah, like you're
Agreed.
saying, they need to give the time to it.
Yep.
Mm. Okay, Heather, I like that. I think that we can work on some things to
Yeah,
get this
let's
done.
get together. Yeah, that would be
Because
good.
that's important work.
I see. That's going to be taken to a whole nother level.
I
But I'm
love it.
behind it 200% because it's needed.
And she gets things
Um,
done. So, hey, um, it's good. Good news.
Yeah, I just never thought about it on that level. And I guess the engagement, and this is why conversations need to be had. Because of the engagement, we need to know where we can effectively, I mean, don't get me wrong, marching and protesting and all that is good, but
Sure,
where can
absolutely.
we take that to make a tangible changes? And I think that
Right.
the Sound Mind Collective is one to get behind for the tangible changes that we're asking for.
Absolutely. And if we're changing things at a formative level, if we're starting to change things in the school level and shift some of that, Virginia is one of the worst states for the school to prison pipeline. And if we can start to shift that, I mean, that really, we're raising up another generation that maybe things look different for them. I mean, that
Hmm.
sounds like pie in the sky, but that's really what we all want.
That's right.
mhm.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Man.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
with that, um, I I do have to ask.
Yeah.
So as a woman, a white woman in today's society, how do you how do you get the Sound Mind Collective, and how do you motivate others like yourself into understanding the need to work across, racial and ethnic barriers? Because the social climate is terrible, and
Yeah.
the Sound Mind Collective is a great thing. But outside of that, what other ways are you working to kind of bridge those barriers?
Like in my personal life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, what the woman who helps me with the strategic planning, that has been fascinating for me, actually, because she's someone who, she actually is a white woman. She's 10 years younger than me, brilliant, and has a big heart and loves people. but when she got started with me, 6 months or so ago, I was even talking to my boyfriend, and I thought, I don't know, because I'm probably, to a lot of white people, I would seem a little radical, and so I thought, I don't know how this is going to go. But what happened was, without me realizing it, just because this is what I talk about, this is how I live, this is what my life is, things started changing for her. And so she has told me numerous times of situations that she's been in, because she's in a much more, how do you put this? Typical white family background, I guess you would say. And her boyfriend, and they live over in the country, and have, different ideals, even in the way I was raised. I was raised differently than a lot of white people were. She's been able to have conversations with people that I would never be able to have conversations with, because they would maybe see me as too radical, or I've been called the N-word lover before, and that's a way to discount, what I have to say. And so she's told me numerous times about, she went to Florida a month and a half ago to visit with friends from college. And these are, conservative white women that are not in my circle. And she said they started talking about some political things, and she was able to bring a different perspective. And because they know her and respect her, they listened. And I think for me, what's been awesome, and I saw myself doing this, on an organizational level, but didn't think about it as much on a personal level. It's been those people who listen long enough. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And so for people close to me, when they hang around long enough and they start to see it, then they can't unsee it, which means that that humanity in them, that compassion in them, compels them to speak up to the people around them when they hear something that is just blatantly wrong, and that is really, really cool for me. And then another powerful moment that was good for me is that, my parents, my dad was a pastor. And so I was raised in a Pentecostal church in downtown Charlottesville, in a storefront. And from the beginning, our church was diverse, from not just with culture, but also socioeconomically and age-wise. And that's just how my family raised me. We had people in and out of our house all the time, of all different, races and creeds. And it was just my upbringing. So my dad and mom's closest friends are a Black couple, and they joined the church when I was 4 or 5. And he was in med school and she was in law school. And now, she's a successful lawyer, and he's an incredibly successful heart surgeon. And they've maintained this very close relationship. And my dad is very honest. I get that, from him. And they've had powerful conversations. That was some of my first exposure to racism, was as a small child, listening to Thomas tell my dad that he realizes he can no longer drive his car wearing his scrubs or his sweatsuit because he had been pulled over and slammed against the car one too many times. And I've heard that as, a 6-year-old, and had to ask my dad why, and, saw that it hurt my dad, and was confused because Thomas and Dana were part of our family, So this has been, a couple, and then their children, who's been part of our lives since I was a little girl. But when my dad was here and heard me speak at the NAACP rally, one of the things that I said to white people was, if you really truly do have a relationship with Black people, then you need to go to those people and ask for forgiveness, because I guarantee you that you have been given a pass, and maybe in a time you didn't even realize that you had hurt your friend, but because they love you and they care about you, they took that burden upon themselves quietly to preserve the integrity of the relationship rather than call you out. And I think all of us have a responsibility to go back and ask for forgiveness, and say, not demand an answer, not demand, a response, but just to say, I realize that in our relationship, I probably have wounded you at some time in the past. And please, going forward, I want you to call me out, And so that night before my dad went home, he got really teary, and he said, Heather, Thomas and I have had numerous conversations since, the death of George Floyd, and obviously way before that, but more recently. And he said, but I'm going to call him tomorrow and ask for his forgiveness because I know that he has given me a pass and I don't want him to. I want us to have an authentic relationship.
Wow.
That meant a lot to me because that was my dad, So for him to have learned something from me was powerful. And he did. He called me the next day and had talked to Thomas, and he said that they had a really amazing conversation, and Thomas was blown away and humbled that my dad would say that. And they did have a conversation. Thomas was able to say, yeah, there have been times that you hurt me. I know you didn't. I know that wasn't your intention. But yeah, I have given you a pass. So
wow, Heather, that's an incredible story.
Not only beyond incredible, I'm going to say this in all honesty, because Lisa, I don't know if you remember, but I know we've sat here and what you just said, Heather, is something that I've said for the longest time. If white America could just take 30 seconds to just acknowledge the history and apologize, that would be the first step. And what you just said, because I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Lisa, I'm looking at my wife, and the feeling that I have, that's the first olive branch to ease and soothe. The pain will never go away, but to acknowledge what has happened and to say that you're sorry can make all of this a conversation that we can all sit down openly discuss. And that story that you just told, it touched me in my heart. And I thank you for sharing that. And I hope that people really get to listen and hear that, because I've said that for the longest, that's all that's really needed to kind of ease tensions and create dialogue. Because I heard that, I felt that in my spirit.
I did too. I felt that
So
story.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
And it was just amazing that you as a daughter was able to bring unconscious awareness to your dad. What an amazing experience to have with a parent, right? And I met your dad, and he's an awesome guy. And I was at that rally, as a matter of fact. But
right, yeah.
for him, it was an aha moment, right?
Yep,
and for you to have that uncanny ability to make those aha moments. We understand that we cannot get to everyone, right? We understand that some people love and hold on to racism and white nationalism and supremacy and things like that. But it's just the fact to have that aha moment in a time of unrest, a time where the nation is divided, and a time where you can reach a heart, even if it's just 1, 2, 3 at a time, just to chip away. And that I think that was powerful, because we do give our white counterparts a pass just because we don't want to. And it's not that we don't love you. It's just that we don't want to hurt, because the hurt begets hurt, right? So if we respond in that moment, if we respond right then and there, whether it's a work situation or an intimate situation, it could potentially divide the relationship or disseminate the relationship. So that I think that was a good lesson, man. That was powerful.
I think in that alone, I think what I'm taking from today, because we've allowed so much. I don't want to say allowed. We've had so much happen to us that a lot of times when we respond, our white friends or our white community, they don't understand it, because it goes back to kind of what Heather had said earlier. They've never really had to endure the hurt on a daily like we have.
Right.
And sometimes when we do respond, and our response is so alarming, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just being honest. It's very alarming.
I agree. Yep.
To our white friends and our white community. And I think a lot of times that's why we don't to our white friends, because it's like you're going to take the brunt for all of your community.
Right.
No, really. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Right. Yeah.
And it's surprising. It's shocking. Like, oh, look, you know how many times, I've gone off and people are like, oh shit, that's Damon? Like, because they've never seen that side. But sometimes you do get to a point as a human being like, yo, I've had enough.
Everybody does. Yeah,
But they're
absolutely.
not used to our enough,
Yes.
in that setting.
Yep.
So, but what she did again, Heather, that was amazing. I'm going to walk with that story probably for the rest of my life because that was really a touching story. And I thank you. So before we get out of here,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I continue to get weepy eyed and all emotional, could you
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 need a
know
tissue, Tito?
yeah, man, look. Whew, that one, like I said, because it's one of those you hear stories. Like honestly, I'm sitting here like I can feel it in my soul. Like you get that shake, that
Yeah, yeah,
magnetism thing
yeah.
on. Like I really feel that. I really do.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
look, Lisa, I'm just gonna jump on your question here because I just gotta ask this one here because now it leads to you know take a few minutes to share your thoughts, Heather, on how we can get to continuing to establish a positive, constructive dialogue between the black and white community. Not even black and white. We talked through on the break. I really want to see black, brown, yellow. Look, I don't care if there's some aliens here. Like, how do we get here to a point where we can sit down and have a constructive dialogue against, within all our community?
Yeah. I think these kinds of setups are a start. I do. I would love to see, and I know COVID makes it hard,
Hmm.
but I would love to see this kind of panel even be, in one of our high school auditoriums, where we can have a large group of people and have some questions and some questions and answers happening on the spot of people within our community. I think in order for things to change, in order for white America to start to recognize the gravity of what we're dealing with and start to make that apology, which I agree with you 100%. I could talk about that for hours. I think that's the starting place as well. Um, there has to be this human connection. And it makes me sad that there just isn't inherently already for a lot of white America, that, we're all humans, but it seems to have just been in the foundations of our country of starting with slavery that has continued on for white America, that I don't know that most white people would be willing to say, yes, I believe that black people are inferior, but their words and their actions would definitely lead me to believe that. And that begins to change when you start seeing people as someone who is just like you, which is, I mean, shouldn't be an aha moment, but is apparently for some, which is why when George Floyd was killed, that was so powerful for white America, because it took them a few weeks. They came up with an alternative you know, dialogue and started to rip him to shreds. Of course they had to. But for a few weeks at least, they we didn't know what to do. Like I can't believe that this could happen in our country. And that's where some of the change starts to happen, is when you can look at someone who maybe doesn't look like you skin color wise, but has, kids that are the same age as you, or they're in the same industry of a job as you are. They, you've both been in the army, or, oh my gosh, we go to that church too, or I grew up in that town as well, or I know, making these human connections is what starts to break down some of these walls. And it sometimes feels overwhelming, because it feels like what you were saying earlier, that it's that brick by brick and block by block. And um, but I think that catches fire. I think that can be a powerful way to do things. So to continue it, I think we just have to keep doing this. We just have to make time for it and keep doing it in a public space, so that people can listen and hear and hopefully find parts of themselves within these stories, and take it back to their families and to their coworkers and to their friends, and for them to think about it and let it move their hearts and their spirits. And I don't know what else to do other than to keep talking, to keep
And
speaking.
doing what you're doing, and doing what you're doing on the forefront, in the front lines,
Agreed.
which is always helpful.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
it's my honor.
at this point, um, we're like I said, I got notes and ideas, but we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's portion with you. I want you to know
Absolutely.
we are going to look to have you come back, hopefully real soon,
That'd be great.
and we're going to work on putting on a panel together,
Yeah, that sounds
of different people.
fantastic.
and have you come on and really we'll dive into some more of the community issues and racial and social issues here in America. I really love your drive, your ideas, and where you're coming from. So before we close out, if you don't mind, please take a few minutes to share your information. You know, where our guests and listeners can find you online, your social media, any events that you have coming up. Please go ahead and share that before we close out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So my website is the SoundMind Collective, all one word.com. And I also have a YouTube channel as well that hopefully will continue to get better. But that is the SoundMind Collective as well. If you find yourself at a band, that's not me. You'll see me on the little thumbnails. Make sure you put that the in front there. I do have Instagram, and it's the SoundMind Collective as well. And so you can find me across all of those areas. And then help wise, if you want to send emails, I've got proposals with out right now with Stafford County Schools, with Prince William County Schools, with Stafford Board of Supervisors, with Rappahannock Regional Correctional Facility. You know, if you any of those places, if you send an email to you know, the powers that be in any of those places, superintendent, you know, the head of the jail, the superintendent in Prince William County, they all have my information, that we've all had at least one or two back and forths, and let them know that you think that this is valuable, and that they should be signing a contract with us. And yeah, I hope to be doing more in the community soon. I've definitely realized that I had some sadness and some anxiety going on the last few weeks after the most recent issues that were going on, and have rallied myself again to get back in the forefront. But part of that is making sure I stay connected with people like yourself, you know, to keep the my passion and my drive doesn't ever go away, but it's easy sometimes to feel discouraged. So I don't want to sit down. You know, I know that I've been given this idea and this dream for a reason, and I'm determined to see it to fruition. So I appreciate you guys, and come find me on social media, send me a message, let me know how I can help, and I'll do my best.
Good job.
Great job, and we most certainly will. Like I said, I love your authenticity. You know, your authentic self really speaks, and everything that you're doing is amazing and is great. And continued success to you,
Thank you so much.
Leach.
Well, thank
I
you,
see you
Heather.
smiling. Anything?
Yeah,
Huh?
I know, because this was a great show. You know, it was definitely a great show. I think that it was definitely a learning show. It was educational and empowering. And I just thank you, Heather, for giving us your time today, which I know is valuable. So we do
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
the time you spent here with us on Two Mics Up. We definitely hope to have you back soon. And
Yes, me too. This was
I
fun.
will be reaching out and see how we can get some emails and get some of these people on board. So
Yeah,
I appreciate you so much.
thank
thanks
you.
for
The feeling is
coming.
mutual. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you guys. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So, as we do, listeners, you know, you can always do the same. You can follow us online, www.twomicsup.com. You can follow us along social media, Facebook, IG, and Twitter at Two Mics Up. Go ahead and subscribe for free. It's totally free right now. Take a listen, give us a like, give us a follow, drop us a comment. And as we always do around this time, stay safe, stay blessed. Mike's out.
Mike's out.
What's happening, listeners? It's your man Dame D NYDC, host of the Two Mics Up podcast. If you know of any small black businesses or anyone who's out here working hard to educate, empower, and positively impact our communities, we want to hear from you or from them today. Please go to www.twomicsup.com/contact. Drop us a line so we can go ahead and connect to try to work to bring your story to our community. At the end of the day, it's going brick by brick, block by block, community by community to stand as one. As always, stay safe, stay blessed. Mike's out. At this time, we'd like to thank our executive producer in Cunningham and our executive marketing and branding team of A. Cunningham and D. Martin from 94 Media House for their contributions to today's podcast.